I'm glad to see a great turnout. I do encourage you to come or sit where you're comfortable. The attention will be up on the screen above me in a few minutes. I'm going to quickly introduce Aaron Parks, who is the Assistant Executive Director of the Institute of Texan Cultures. They have been very generous in supplying this wonderful space for us to have the open house and presentation tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and then I'll go over a few things, and then we'll get the presentation started.
Thanks, Sonia. Good evening, friends. We're glad you're here. I just wanted to say on behalf of the staff and volunteers of the Institute of Texan Cultures, we bid you welcome. We're glad you're here. We invite you to learn about the good things that are happening here at the Institute of Texan Cultures by visiting our website, texancultures.com. I would also encourage you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Point of personal privilege, I just wanted to say, as a tenant of Hemisphere Park, I think all of you experienced this as you came here. Accessibility is a real issue. The tenants of Hemisphere Park are doing very good work for the citizens of San Antonio, and we want to make it easier for you to get here. The need to redevelop the streets surrounding Hemisphere Park is very real, and the need to develop a downtown transportation plan that is going to make it easy for constituents to come downtown and throughout downtown, including Hemisphere Park, is very real. We applaud your participation in tonight's conversation, and we sincerely appreciate your support. I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
So just quickly before I hand it over to Carrie Collins, I want to point out a few things. Everybody should have got a handout. On the handout, it has the agenda, of course. It has my contact information if you have any questions after tonight. And the yellow square is the Downtown Transportation Studies survey that is online and will be available until March 16th, next Friday. The back of the agenda is the wall graphic. If you attended the workshop back in January for the first public meeting for the Hemisphere Streets, that is basically the outputs that came out from the various groups about the improvements they wanted to see on the various streets. The next information is the development in the Downtown Transportation Study. So it has the various categories, the street typologies, and the back sheet describes what those different typologies are. When the presentation is over, I encourage you to visit the station over here where the maps are. You can literally write on the maps and put your comments. Now is the time to do it. The next time we come back to you, the concepts will pretty much be finalized. So that's the reason why we came back to you at this juncture. So please take advantage of it. You have a comment card for general comments for the Downtown Transportation Study. And then you have a very thorough comment card for the Hemisphere Streets. You can fill those out tonight before you leave, or you can certainly mail them in or get them to me some other way after tonight. The only thing I ask is please get them to me by next Friday so that they can be included in the meeting record for this particular meeting. Without further ado, the online survey is announced on the agenda. So Carrie Collins is with Pape Dawson, and she's the project manager for the Downtown Transportation Study, and she'll be taking over after me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carrie Collins. I'm a vice president at Pape Dawson Engineers. I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you about the Downtown Transportation Study. After I begin talking a little bit about our project and about the bond projects, I'm going to bring up Phil Myrick with Project for Public Spaces. He's on our team. He's going to talk a little bit about placemaking. After Phil, I'm going to bring up Jim Desa with Arup, and he's going to speak about street typologies. I'd like to refresh your memory, if you were at the first public meeting, about what the purpose of the Downtown Transportation Study is. It's to identify transportation improvements that support the downtown's transformation into an exciting place to live, work, and visit. And this is in support of the Mayor's SA 2020 vision to encourage more residents and more employees downtown. Our project team is a very great team. We have a lot of expertise in all the areas that we need for a project of this magnitude. We have a very accelerated timeline. Our next public meeting is going to be in April, and at that time we should have more of our identified projects and a draft plan to show you. We will be completing the entire study at the end of May. This is a list of the 5 bond projects that were approved by City Council. These are 5 projects that are identified for the downtown, and this was one task that was part of our downtown transportation study. It was really the first task that we had to tackle, and we had to identify 5 projects that would comprise the $40 million in the 2012 bond program. And I'm going to briefly describe each of those 5 projects to you. The first project is the Market Street realignment. And Market Street is going to be realigned to run parallel with Commerce, and there will be new connections with the southbound exit ramp at Commerce and with the eastbound movement on Commerce and southbound to Cesar Chavez Boulevard. The purpose of the Market Street realignment is to allow the expansion of the convention center and to provide connections to the east side, Hemisphere Park, and Cesar Chavez. The current existing volume on Market Street is 17,000 vehicles per day. The second project that we identified was Commerce Street between Santa Rosa and St. Mary's. And what we're proposing for this section of Commerce is to remove a lane in order to allow us to widen the sidewalks, add curb extensions, street trees, streetscaping, on-street parking, and sharrows if possible, and to also consider any placemaking opportunities. And you'll hear more about placemaking when Phil comes up. Just to explain what sharrows are lanes that are shared between bicyclists and vehicles, and they're typically a little wider than the traditional lane, and they have specialized pavement markings that indicate to drivers that they're sharing the lane with bicyclists. Frio Street between Houston and Cesar Chavez Boulevard. We'd like to restripe this section of roadway in order to provide 2 sharrow lanes and a center median turn lane. We also want to reduce the median width where we have insufficient pavement width, and we want to widen the sidewalk to 8 feet. And we feel this is a very good project in the sense that it's located right near UTSA and near the proposed West Side Multimodal Transit Center. And this is a concept that we're showing of Frio. We've picked a section of it and kind of showed the layout with the improved sidewalks and the wider outside lane to accommodate bicyclists. And this is a photo of a sharrow as an example. You can see the unique pavement marking. Again, these are concepts. They are not final design. It doesn't mean that the final design is going to look exactly like this, but we want to present some ideas of the types of recommendations that we're coming up with for the downtown transportation study. And this is a photo from the NACTO Bike Design Guide, which also shows sharrow pavement markings. The next project is Main Avenue and Soledad between Martin and Commerce. We have a unique opportunity with Main and Soledad in that when Main Plaza was put in, the volumes on Main and Soledad reduced dramatically. Current volumes are 7,000 vehicles per day on Main and 5,000 vehicles per day on Soledad. So this gives us a chance to use some of that existing pavement to do something else. So we're proposing to incorporate some angle parking to add some more downtown parking and to also add bike lanes, widen the sidewalks, add streetscaping elements, and consider some placemaking opportunities. And all this would be in support of future businesses. And again, these are concepts, not final design. The actual final design will be detailed at the time that the design process takes place later. This is a schematic showing the concept for Main Avenue and Soledad, and here we're showing reverse angle parking, which works well with bike lanes, but we could very easily change this to head-in angle parking and shift our bike lanes to the other side of the street. But this adds more downtown street parking. It also gives opportunities for planting some street trees, putting in curb extensions, and making this section look a lot nicer. And this is an example of an area where reverse angle parking bike lanes were put in on an existing street. And this is another example of a sharrow combined with reverse angle parking. And this is a view of Main Avenue from Pecan looking south, and this is what it looks like today, and you can see how wide the pavement is there. And this is potentially what it could look like if we actually did what we're proposing, which is adding some trees and some streetscaping, adding some angle parking on one side, parallel parking on the other, and reducing those lane widths to provide some bike lanes as well. The other project location is this very unique intersection on the north side near the library, San Pedro, Main Navarro, Soledad intersection. And this is a very challenging intersection to drive through. The few times I've driven through it, I was very cautious and felt like I was going to potentially go in the wrong direction. So we want to try and reconfigure this channelized intersection to improve the safety, reduce the confusion that drivers experience as they navigate it, and incorporate pedestrian amenities, streetscaping, and also take advantage of some placemaking opportunities. And the current volume going through this intersection today is 18,000 vehicles per day. And all of these recommendations and improvements that we're coming up with, we're actually analyzing and evaluating to make sure that they will work today and they will work in the future in year 2020. And we have some options that we've looked at for this. And again, these are just ideas and concepts at this point. But this option one, all of these options actually bring the approaches of the intersection closer to the center and simplify the directions that the drivers are taking. The bus contraflow lane that is there right now that actually goes in the opposite direction on Navarro is still going to remain there because it's still going to be needed. But some of these options actually simplify the navigation for many drivers. And this is option 2, and I'll shift back and forth so you can kind of see the channelization and the island in the middle kind of change. And option 3 shifts Camden a little bit south out of the intersection, which simplifies it. And then lastly, we actually looked at putting a roundabout in here, which would remove all left turn movements, which would make it a lot safer. The roundabout option would require some right-of-way acquisition, though. And each of these alternatives actually creates a little extra green space around this whole area. And there are some things that you can potentially do with that green space, such as placemaking opportunities. And this is a view looking north along Main. And this is what it looks like today towards the church. And this is what it potentially could look like if you had a little more greenery, park area. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. And if you haven't already stopped in the back to look at some of the boards with some of the more information about the bond projects, please go ahead and do that. And this is Phil Myrick.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carrie. Placemaking is this art and science that PPS has been espousing for the last 35 years, based on the fact that we've been building so many streets in downtowns even that push people out of the picture and really are left, what's remaining is big buildings, wide streets, and narrow sidewalks. And so, we've been advocating for years for a different approach, looking around us and pointing at the evidence and saying that, well, we've done a really good job the last few decades designing for cars, and what do we got? We got more cars. But you actually can have a mindset and intentionally design for people, and you will get more people, and that is becoming a wave, a trend that is influencing urban planning and design and engineering in every city in the country, if not the world. So it is great. This plan is an absolutely amazing opportunity for downtown to become a more vibrant downtown and a better place that will attract more investment and more business and more residents. So there were lots of placemaking opportunities in this project, and we did a couple of quick concepts for 2 of them. One was Main Avenue and Soledad, which, we were looking at this great section design of how those streets could be improved and more sidewalk space and bike lanes, but we looked at those parking lots and we thought, no matter how good the right-of-way design is, you're still going to have these long blocks of parking to walk along, and what could you potentially do there? And in some of the images Carrie showed, you had long hedges that could be, plantings that screen the parking lots, But we played with some ideas for how to enliven, how to bring street life activity to those as well, even on those undeveloped properties. So working within the right-of-way and potentially in partnership with the owners of those parking, the edges of the parking lots right along the sidewalk, we think you could do a number of different things that use plantings, that use trees, street trees, public seating and other amenities, but also, little pop-up retail, whether they're food trucks or whether they're temporary buildings or whether they're kiosks. Basically, where you see the numbers 1 across those key cross streets, how do those blocks not become breaks in the fabric of the street activity, but how do you fill that in with activity that faces those sidewalks? And then even along the edge, along Frost Park, whether there are wider sidewalks that could be used for more amenities, bike racks, seating, cafe tables, little more park-like uses that become part of the mixture. And then again, one of the other key sites to bring activity, to energize those little stretches of your walk through downtown so that it's both beautiful and exciting and sort of, we're trying to create breadcrumb trails through downtown so that you have interesting ways to walk through, and really it picks up the energy and it attracts more people, more energy, and eventually development to those sites. The other site that we looked at was, and this shows a site where the 4 is just the enhancements that are more beautification that start to pick up the link to the Riverwalk and then the Riverwalk back to downtown. So those were some ideas. And then at this other intersection, which is outside the library, I always thought the first time I came here, I took a tour of that area. And by the Ursuline Academy, the College of Art, and the Riverwalk, the streets are really nice, small scale, very charming almost, that you could imagine walking along and exploring. And then you get to this library, which is this iconic statement, and then you see that church, and you think, well, between the church and the library and that Riverwalk, we ought to be able to do something that's, pulls it all together, that sets off those buildings with a public space. So we had some ideas for how you could actually cobble together those different fragments and do a more universal public realm program between those buildings. And how to program those different parks, whether there's an outdoor library, whether there's a church square that could be used for the outdoor receptions and events and wedding photographs and all that kind of thing, whether there's a new entrance that's more expressive of the interior of that library, and bring that stuff out to the sidewalk. Make your walk interesting. Make this actually a place where you would, after visiting the library or the hospital or the church, there'd be all kinds of other activities to enjoy outside, and a quick rendering down looking towards the library with the church on the lower left. And Jim Dace is going to take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I've got 6.5 minutes to go through street typologies. This is an element of our downtown study, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. The last series of slides are examples that I can show. And if I run out of time, we'll just leave it at that. You can come over to our table and some of our boards, and we can talk about the details further. So what are street typologies? In a way, it's a way of providing design guidance for streets that are rebuilt or reconstructed in the future. And instead of just dealing with the car, as Phil had indicated, since the 50s, all of our street standards have really just dealt with the car, and they have a small area on the side for pedestrians, sometimes with bikes. But now we're looking at streets differently. We're looking at streets as how do we allocate the right-of-way, which is very valuable real estate. You don't have a lot of it all over the place. How do you allocate it to all the different modes of transportation that need to use the streets? So we developed these 5 different street types, and each one has a different emphasis on its design in terms of what we want to focus our energy on when we design the street or when we reconstruct the street, we're not only looking at what the street serves today, but what it might serve in the future by looking at all the planning that's going on around the street. So we look at the downtown as basically two different areas. There are areas of downtown we call areas of stability. They're really not going to change in the future. They're single-family residential homes or well-established historic districts that are just not going to change, and you can enhance those streets. But then there are areas we call growth areas, areas of change. Things are going to happen there. There's already development interest in those places. And those are the locations where the mayor's plan for bringing in 7,500 new housing units will go in those areas. And those are the types of places we want to provide more balanced transportation systems. So these street types focus on what needs to be prioritized in a particular corridor. Okay, what's the basis for it? It really is, instead of looking at the traffic projections, we do look at that, by the way, that's important. We look at the type of adjacent land use that needs to be served. The street needs to also serve what's going on in the buildings adjacent to the street. Now, if it's a retail area that generates a lot of activity like restaurants and shopping and retail, and maybe it even has housing above, then the street needs to accommodate that activity as well as the cars that will be coming into the area or the bikes that might be traveling on the road. So we look at the activity generated by today's and the future land use, and we also look at the transportation function. And all this needs to be balanced together in terms of the right-of-way. And by the way, San Antonio's right-of-way is all over the place. There's no one predominant width of street. It gives a little taste of your history. So it's challenging to build any road within any given right-of-way. The study includes defining the characteristic of these 5 types. We do some drawings and illustrations, and you can see some examples of those at the table or the boards in the back. So we encourage you to come over there, talk to us, ask questions, make some comments. And then we have some general guidelines on how these might get implemented. So the study that we're doing will have the typical design. So basically, if we want to implement a downtown activity street, we show a typical design. These are the types of design elements that should be included on this type of street. And we talk about what its design emphasis is. Then we have things called overlays. So certain streets have transit on it, but not every street has transit on it. So we have a special design overlay for transit. We have an overlay for bicycles. We have an overlay for streets that serve as access to the Riverwalk. So certain conditions will have a special set of design criteria. Then we look at things called opportunities. Opportunities are like Phil was doing, a chance to do something different to enhance the area in the neighborhood for economic activity or for placemaking for various reasons. Those could be like stormwater management. We might want to use natural or pervious pavement or natural vegetation to clean the water. We find those kind of opportunities when we reconstruct a street. And the last thing is special streets. Those are the types of streets that are so unique in San Antonio that they require their own individual and custom design, and you cannot provide a standard or a set of criteria for them. So here are the street types that we're thinking about. We have these 5, and we try to give them names that relate to what we visualize and what the plans in San Antonio visualize for these streets. And the design emphasis is in that one column. So downtown activity is really the central core of the downtown. It's for the emphasis is pedestrian convenience and adjoining economic activity. So there'll be restaurants, street cafes, merchandise and wares out on the sidewalk, lots of social and recreational things happening on the street, as well as handling cars and the freight that comes to deliver the goods. Downtown lifestyle is in areas where there's going to be a lot of the newer, higher density residential coming in. 7,500 dwelling units by 2020. Where are you going to put them? They're in certain areas that are ripe for redevelopment. These types of streets are both a combination of the activity street, but also a place where people live. So they come down to the street, they want to walk to the grocery store, they want to walk to the park. These types of streets are they're lively and they're active, but they're not quite as active as the central core streets. And then there's this group of streets that we call downtown essential. They accommodate a mix of different types of land uses. One side might be residential, the other side might be kind of a light industrial. So they have trucks and they have cars. It's an area, there are areas of town that have workforce housing, which is important, and also the types of industrial or quasi-industrial services that you need, but you're not going to find in the core. Then there's the residential streets, and those are pretty obvious, mostly single-family residential. King Williams comes to mind as one of the areas that we've mapped out that is this type of street. The emphasis is low traffic, low speeds, and a really good pedestrian environment for walking. And then the last one is principal route. These are streets that emphasize longer distance travel, higher speed travel, usually from the freeways into the core, into the other neighborhoods. So we've got a map. It's a draft, and you can't see it on this diagram, but we have large versions of it over here. We encourage you to go look at them where we have mapped out these various areas. And remember, they're both supposed to reflect existing types of land uses and what the future is going to hold for those areas. So the guidelines that we'll be putting in our study will be showing the typical right-of-way. You'll see plan views of intersections and street segments like this, and we'll show photographic and diagrammatic examples of what each element is comprised of. Like how does a curb extension work? How does the restaurant area of a sidewalk work, etc. And then we'll have these focused diagrams for overlays. Like this example here is a bus stop, and what type of amenities are put at the bus stop, how the landscaping works with it, how the crosswalks work, etc. And then we'll be showing lots of photographs as well and examples from other places. So these are opportunities. All these are stormwater management opportunities. They're either pervious pavement so that rainwater can go back into the ground and recharge the water table, or they're using natural or indigenous vegetation to clean and slow the water down before it goes back into the storm drain system or into the ground. And then the overlays, what we're thinking of are a lot of historic streets in San Antonio. So we're looking at what we call heritage or story streets. These are streets that tell a story as you walk along them because there's so many historic markers that could identify a route. Riverwalk access, so that people who are visiting for the first time, and I have to admit, like 15 years ago when I first came here, I thought this town was dead until I walked across a bridge and I saw Riverwalk. But I didn't know how to get there. And that kind of gateway access is important. Distinctive districts, a district that might want to have an individual or distinctive way of identifying its boundaries. Special overlays for the visitor areas, tourist areas, transit bicycle, we talked about those. So here's an example of an overlay that is actually multiple types of overlays. This is Houston Street. It's not only a heritage story street, it's got Riverwalk access. It's also a distinctive district in itself. And lots of tourists and visitors go to this street, and it has bicycle travel on it, as you can see by the sign. So this one's challenging because it has lots of different overlays to implement. And here's a couple of Riverwalk access points. One is more urban, and it has urban design on Houston Street. And then there's a simple one on Cesar Chavez. But these are the markers that are there, but how do you get to those if you're not familiar with the system? Now I'll go through examples of the different activity streets. So this would be an example of a downtown activity street. It serves mainly for lots of pedestrian travel to and from the job center that it's in. This is a downtown environment, but then there's also places for employees to have lunch right on the sidewalk, and there's on-street parking, and there's retail on the ground floor. Another example, there's always a space for walking, and it's usually wider than a residential area, and then there's this wider area that could be used for outdoor seating. Downtown lifestyle is mainly residential, but there might be some retail or restaurants on the ground floor as well. But it's a quieter environment, it's a quieter street. So the landscaping is a little bit more lush. On-street parking is usually for the residents or the ground floor retail. And this can go into much more urban type of downtown lifestyle where there's higher density residential above the ground floor. Or it could be this example from Portland, Oregon, which is a reconstruction of an old warehouse turned into lofts, and you have something like that, Cadillac lofts here in San Antonio, but the ground floor is retail and active uses. So downtown essential, basic street, 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, basic sidewalk width, pedestrian scaled lighting, safe crossings, nothing special about it, but you have a lot of these, they're important, they serve a function, but you need to design them to accommodate everybody who needs to use them, including trucks. And a downtown essential kind of focuses on pedestrian safety. So here's an example of a 4-lane downtown essential street in another city. But look at the crossings. So there's a curb extension. There's a highly visible marked crosswalk. There's a median in the street with a pedestrian refuge. which you can see in this photograph. The pedestrian refuge has a wide island area for somebody to stand while they're waiting for the traffic to go by and a gap to cross the street. This is not a very active area, but they're focusing on both moving traffic and accommodating pedestrians safely. Now, the residential is clearly, the emphasis here is, low volume, low speed, a good walking environment for the people who live here. This is in the King Williams district, so it's a very, very nice area. The trees are very important on this type of street, so you want these canopy trees to grow over time. They can also look like this over time as well. There's a different feel here on these residential streets. It's an area of stability. It's not going anywhere. It's really important to preserve, enhance, maintain. The last one then is principal route, Cesar Chavez. You need to move traffic on these, but there are also long corridors that are good for bicycle travel, and pedestrians need to access all the uses along them, so it shares with everybody. Principal routes sometimes are pretty high speed and high volume, but yet they can still have active uses on the sides if you buffer the traffic from the active uses well. This is an example of a very tight right-of-way where there's no room to provide wide buffers or trees. So what they've done is they put a cast iron fence adjacent to the sidewalk, planted some smaller trees and some shrubbery in there, and then put these benches along it, and it effectively creates a location where people still want to walk, and they even sit there with traffic going by at 40 miles per hour because they feel safe enough to do so. That's it. We do encourage you to come to the areas where we have our diagrams, large-scale illustrations. You can see what we're doing, ask questions, and mark on our maps as well.
Thank you. Thank you. So I do want to make a quick announcement before I turn it over to McCool. We are videotaping this presentation, and it will be posted to the Downtown Transportation website, which is on your agenda. We will be sending out an e-blast to remind you about the survey. Please tell your friends, please advertise it to your organizations. We understand that your time is very valuable, so the reason we did the format this way is so that you can get your questions answered on your time as much as possible. We really encourage you to get your comments into us by next Friday, March 16th, so they can be considered as we move forward. Without further ado, McCool. That's a pointer, that's a laser pointer there. We gotta turn back that way to point.
Thanks, Sonia. So it's going to be a tough act to follow from the downtown transportation study, but let's try. The key thing is our focus area, as you guys know. Well, before I go to the presentation, how many of you actually came to the first workshop? It's okay, let's not be shy. We can be proud that we attended more than community workshop. Excellent. So some of the ideas that you hear in this workshop is building on what we heard at the last community workshop. So as some of you may remember, the study area for our project is essentially focusing on two primary corridors, Cesar Chavez Boulevard between I-37 and Alamo, and then Alamo between Market and Cesar Chavez Boulevard. We are also looking at other streets that include Market Street right from Alamo to the interchange, and then neighborhood streets that include certain sections of Cesar Chavez Cesar Chavez west of Alamo, and then also smaller streets like Nueva, Arciniega, and then Vilita Street too. In addition, we are also looking at Park Street, streets such as Goliad, Water Street, and other new streets that don't exist right now, but the city has charged us to look as to what is possible out there. Keeping that in mind, the key project objectives, as you well know, is to humanize the car-dominated transportation corridors. Jim just now talked about Cesar Chavez being a principal route and how right now the car rules the street. So clearly we need to incorporate multiple modes of transportation such as bicyclists and pedestrians, create connections. It's not just improving the street right away, but also connecting to the neighborhoods and destinations that are around the streets, and also knit the whole hemisphere to the emerging cultural corridor, as well the expanding mission reach. We want to incorporate low impact design and sustainable elements that you just saw, and we will show you how we have done it. And at the end of the day, we want to support Hemisphere as a true urban neighborhood, which is anchored by various existing and planned regional destinations. So as you guys know, we are building on past planning efforts, including the Bike Master Plan, as well working with Kerry and her team with the Downtown Transportation Study to make sure all these projects come together. So when we met you last, we did the visioning workshop, as some of you were there, and we heard great number of ideas from you. It was amazing. We had more than 15 breakout groups. Yeah, there were at least 2-3 groups for each street, and we're going to show you some of the ideas that we heard and how we came up with the preferred concept. But then we have taken all those ideas, built upon them, and come up with the preferred concept, and that is key. We also did a survey. Sonia led the survey, and actually we heard from more than 400 different people as to what they want to see in the individual streets, and that was also something that we incorporated. And then finally, we also met with stakeholders, people who live and work along these corridors, be it hotel owners or just residents who have to experience this street. It's not just they're from 9 to 5, they live along the street itself. So what you will see are the ideas that you have heard, and the key things that you told us to keep in mind, to build upon and not take away, included the great historic context, the multimodal nature that already exists, the great neighborhoods including Lavaca and King William, to just name a few. There are a good mix of uses. We want to build upon it. There's a great number of amenities, and you always talked about how Alamo is a great event street and you want to see more of it. And then finally, we want to make sure that we build on your engagement and your energy. That's crucial. There are also lots of problems. You guys told us that the number one thing, it's very unfriendly for pedestrians and bicyclists. Some of you said, why would I want to walk on Alamo? And that's a good question. So we'll try to see if we can change that question into a statement by saying, we really want to walk on this street. It's very poorly connected. There are not great many edge conditions. And the right-of-way is more than 100 feet wide. And so in some ways, if you look at this street section, this is of Alamo, more than 100 feet wide, that's the total right-of-way. The amount of space that right now is devoted to cars is that dark brown. And the amount of space that is devoted to not cars is just that amount. So can we change this? You told us, yes, we don't want to just change it, but we really want a big change too. So the big ideas and the big thoughts that we heard from you, they were a vast many of them, but the common ones were, everybody said that they wanted to make it well connected for all users. It's not just for cars, it's not just for pedestrians or bicyclists, it's for everybody concerned. And it also has to be for businesses and other users on the street, so that all of them feel safe and secure while they are using this street. Part of it may mean slowing traffic. One thing that everybody wanted was better lighting. It's very dark and dingy, especially in the evening. It needs to have comfortable sidewalks that provide shade and comfort, be it with trees or other shade structures. And it needs to be family and kid-friendly. This is a family town. We want our streets, our downtown streets, to reflect that. And it has to have art and culture that celebrates the history. You can just see out here the immense cultural diversity that we have out here. We want to make sure we experience that, not just in a museum, but also along the streets. And that may include water features, but we also want to show street events and festivals, especially on streets such as Alamo Street. So keeping all these great ideas that we heard from you, let's go to the first street that we were charged with, and that's Cesar Chavez Boulevard. The key thing is that today, while it is a key traffic street, the future as part of the Hemisphere Master Plan and other projects, it needs to be a more mixed-use corridor. So it has to move traffic, but it also has to become a destination street that would attract more activity and more businesses. It needs to change to this changing multimodal need. So yes, cars, very important. A lot of us use it to move and go to other places, but it also should have sidewalks, bike lanes, as well be friendly to transit. And then other amenities that you said that you would like to see, of course, landscaping and shade, stormwater planters, solar panels, wind energy, vertical elements. And other cities have done it successfully across the country, and these are just photos how they have done it in similar right-of-way that are more than 100 feet wide that accommodate 4 lanes or more of moving traffic, 2 in either direction. And they have done it increasingly so. So the big question to us is, can we do it too? And one thing that, besides the stormwater planters, we also heard you guys say that, San Antonio is the place for the new energy, a new energy economy. Our streets need to reflect that aspiration, and our business and an activation should reflect that. So be it solar panels, all wind generating energy elements, we can begin to incorporate those features in our streetscape too. So if you look at the existing right-of-way, which is more than 100 feet wide, people taking their life into their own hands, trying to go from one end of the street to the other, what we looked at your ideas and started to put in was to have maintain the 2 lanes of travel in both directions, have a well-landscaped medium that would accommodate a left turn lane, but also have safe places for people to bike, which would be separated by a parking lane as well as stormwater lane, and then still allow for comfortable sidewalks that are well protected and have adequate shade. At key locations, we would have iconic elements that are not just for wayfinding, but also incorporate wind as well as solar energy and begins to reflect the aspirations of our city. In a plan, that's what it looks like right now. You can see it's not a very friendly street. Car is the primary mode of travel, and what we want to do is dramatically change it. While still allowing for the cars to move, but providing and making sure that pedestrians and bicyclists, as well new business owners and residents fronting onto the street, become equal users of the street. So if we were to put these ideas and these plans in the sections and say put it on the street, what would that be? This is a photo, as you all may be well aware of, with the federal buildings to the right out here, as well the parking lot to the left. We are looking westwards along Caesar. You can see it's not a very friendly place to walk. Why would you want to walk along a street like this? But based on the ideas that we heard for you, we can begin to change it. Be it first adding the trees, the sidewalks, and the bike lanes out here, allowing the traffic to move in both directions, not stopping it, letting it move freely too, but at the same time, creating the right context for new users of the street, be it bicyclists or new activity users, new mixed-use buildings, as has been envisioned by the Hemisphere Master Plan to become a reality. And that becomes a key critical element. I have to say, one of the key things you also told us to do is to change Cesar Chavez's name back to Durango. I have to be honest, that's outside our scope of work. But we do listen, and that is the key thing. So what did you tell us? What did you tell us for Alamo Street? Alamo Street, clearly for us, and as you have clearly said in other planning projects as well as city projects, you want this to be the key cultural corridor. It's a very important street for not just downtown, but for the entire city. We all come to the various festivals on Alamo. It has a special purpose. We want to extend it, and what could that mean is extend the park character across the street so that you're not just walking on the edge of the park. When you drive or you bike or you walk, you go through the park. And also allow for festivals. That was the number one thing you said. We love the festivals, can we have more on the street? So the design tries to keep that flexibility into mind too. Pedestrian is clearly the primary priority, so we need to have comfortable sidewalks and crosswalks, bicycle facilities, parking is important for businesses, and then also allowing for the flexibility for the potential for a future street car. Key amenities and enhancements, multi-purpose structures that begin to activate the streets, street vendors, kiosks, food trucks, anything we can do to help activate what is right now not a very attractive street, we would like to do that, and a key component would be to include public art and historic elements that reflect the unique identity of this place. Other cities have done it, be it comfortable sidewalks for not just adults but kids also to walk comfortably, to talk and sit and relax, as well to enjoy street festivals. It should have the context that allows musicians and other artists to come to the street and embrace it and easily perform other events, because that is what helps make a unique part of our culture and also allow the future for a streetcar, and it can be done within the existing street right away. So again, if you look at the existing street section, this is a day-to-day occurrence. People just crossing street in the middle without any crosswalk. At the same time, you can see how much it right now is devoted to the cars. All you see in the middle of the road are just cars. The proposed, what we are doing is a dramatic change that maintains one lane of travel in both directions, that allows for the through traffic to go unimpeded. However, you still have one more lane in both directions that allows for people who are coming to this area to use it too. So you have two lanes in both directions, but they allow for multiple purposes to happen on the street. This also provides the local access roads on both sides of the street, also provide the space for bicyclists to bike at a comfortable speed, which would be 15 to 20 miles an hour, but it allows the through traffic to move as comfortably and conveniently as possible. But you begin to see what the change is in the street right away, so that you feel you're walking or driving through the park itself. And that is a key component. You need to embrace the street. That's not a street that you would embrace, but that may clearly be an opportunity to embrace the street. And it also then allows for, if the streetcar comes in, the local access road can share the local lane with the automobiles. The transit and the automobile can share the local access lane while still providing the opportunity for the bicyclists to bike comfortably too. That's what the plan looks like right now. That's what we experience, 3 lanes of travel. There's some trees and planter boxes, but really no shade for most pedestrians as they walk along the sidewalk. What you saw in the section in plan, that's what it would look like. And it would begin to see, if you were to drive along this lane or you were to drive along this lane, your experience would be very different than what you do right now. So this is a view we are all familiar with. Nearly everybody brings their kids to the Magic Theater, which is on the right. This is Alamo Street looking north, with Fairmont on the left. And if we were to put in the improvements that you told us you would like to see, that's what you would begin to see. That would be a local access lane that is separated from the through lane, allows a safe place for pedestrians and bicyclists to really enjoy the street. And the key thing is, you told you don't want to design it for one day, not just for traffic to move through or a weekday. You want to design Alamo for multiple occasions. So this may be happening 300 days of the year, but you could allow other opportunities for more people to come on weekends, or to take over the parking lane and enjoy a festival, be it put taco trucks, but just be able to enjoy this unique street as the street life goes by. And finally, to allow festivals and events to happen, you could close the local access lane and have a great, wonderful street while still allowing the commute traffic to go in the middle of the road. So keeping that in mind, the first thing that comes to my mind when I begin to draw this, and I'm sure it's coming to your mind too, will traffic work? Is it going to be gridlock? Let's see. Let's look at what works right now and how many volume of cars do we have. And Kerry and other members of the Pave Dawson team started to look at how many cars do actually travel on the street right now. On Alamo, on a given day, it's about 9,000 cars. On Cesar Chavez, as we all know, it's much, much more. It's double that amount, 17,000 near Alamo, but about 21,000 cars towards near the interchange. So when you saw these concepts, we were not just trying to design for today, we were also trying to design for tomorrow. And the volume, say in 2020, goes to about from 9,000 on Alamo to about 12,000 to 13,500. And on Cesar Chavez, it goes from about 17,000 to 22,000 to even 27,000. So can we accommodate all that we dreamed into the street that we just talked about? Kerry did a lot of analysis and so did her colleagues. And let's see how it begins to pan out. This, I have to say, is called level of service. Some of you may be aware of it. It's basically a grade that you give as to how traffic moves from A, B, C, D, E, and F. And as we know from all our report cards, F, you failed. A, you did really, really good, and you deserve something really good too. So that's what happens right now at the key intersections. We took 5 or 6 key intersections on Cesar Chavez Boulevard, right at where it meets the frontage road, along Cesar Chavez at the South Alamo intersection, at Indianola, St. Mary's, and then at South Alamo, we also looked at East Nueva and Market Street, because it's important not just to look at your own study area, but also how do these improvements impact the surrounding uses. We looked at it, what happens in the morning, which is the peak hour, and in the evening, which is also the peak hour. And as you can see, some of these intersections actually work pretty well. Like Cesar Chavez in Indianola, it's B, but some of them do not. And there is D, which is not bad. You can still move. It's not a problem at all, but it's not as convenient as possible. Keeping that in mind, we said, what if we were to put the improvements now? The streetscape designs that we envisioned, what if it goes right now? What would it look right now? And you can see it actually begins to move traffic in a more favorable way because of the intersection improvements, the traffic signal improvements, making sure we reduce the friction that happens between cars that are about to park and cars that need to move throughly. There are a number of ways you can actually improve the overall flow of traffic. So you begin to see that from, say, Cesar Chavez Boulevard in South Alamo, you could go from D to B, which is not so bad, which is pretty good if you look at you are able to move the traffic. And you can clearly see that a lot of the intersections are actually improving. None of them are getting worse, and that is a key thing we have to keep in mind. Complete Streets is not about making the life of cars difficult. Complete Streets' job is to make the life of pedestrians and bicyclists also good. So what if we were to build it in the future? So if you look again at the existing intersections, and if you were to do no improvements and all the development that has been envisioned for downtown happens, you begin to see that without that, some of the intersections, Cesar Chavez and Indianola, go from B to C, and in the evening, it gets worse. Cesar Chavez and Alamo Street goes from D to E, and so does Cesar Chavez Boulevard and St. Mary's. So if we were to do the improvements, we actually see that we make sure that it does not go to E. It actually remains as good, if not better, than what exists right now. And that's critical. We want to improve the flow and mobility for all users concerned. A good question to ask is, what happens to the pedestrians and bicyclists? We've been talking a lot about the cars. Do their lives also improve? Well, you can see if you look at if you're walking on Alamo northbound in the morning, which is the peak commute travel even for the cars to go through, you begin to see that right now, auto has a D, transit A, bike C, so on and so forth. It's usually in the B's and C's that we see out here. But with all the improvements, the sidewalks, the bike lanes, does that improve? The key thing is, if we build it right now, there would be a dramatic change in the way bicyclists and pedestrians will experience the street. And this is not even counting the fact that we would put a lot of trees and shade and comfort. This is just talking about overall safety and security of moving people by biking or if they're just walking the street. And the same goes with even 2020. You clearly begin to see how all the streetscapes that we are talking about, and this goes for other streets like Cesar Chavez, if you're walking on Cesar Chavez in the evening eastbound, or if you're walking on Cesar Chavez westbound, you begin to see, if you look at this column, which is what it is right now, where you see a lot of B's, C's, and E's, and out here you see a lot of B's, A's, and C. So if you went to your parent with this report card, you would definitely get a hug, right? It's a good report card at the very least. And that's important for us. We want to improve everybody's life and make sure that the money that the city is spending on this is money well spent. That becomes very critical. The third street is Market Street, and Market Street is essentially looking at two areas. One is the section between Alamo and Bowie, for which we were to do just a basic concepts, and then the section east of Bowie. As you know, the city is planning to relocate the western half of the convention center out here and move it closer to the I-37 interchange. That would allow for new improvements, and be it buildings or park improvements, to happen in Hemisphere Park. But as you can clearly see, there are a number of roads that go right now under the planned footprint of the convention center. So what we looked at is how we could realign Market Street. And the key thing out here is begin to look at what is the existing section of Market Street, especially west of Bowie. It's essentially 4 lanes with 1 dedicated bus lane. The aim is to improve it. The city is proposing to take out the dedicated bus lane on Market Street and provide greater opportunities for bike and stormwater, while at the same time making the sidewalks more inviting to walk along. But what about the realignment section of Market Street? Right now, as you can all recognize, this is what the convention center is. That section is aimed to be put out here. That part of the convention center will remain as is. You can see the number of roads, 1, 2, 3, 4, that all go through this area. So looking at how to realign Market Street, we said, what are the opportunities? Number one, we could extend Market Street all the way through so that the frontage road and the connection, the off-ramp that goes onto Commerce right now gets extended further, meets at a T intersection and goes all the way through. It still does all the on-ramp and the connections to Montana and other places. The other key thing is it would have to make improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists. This is not just about moving the cars again. Yes, that's critical, that's important, but the improvements would also include bike and pedestrian improvements all along the road. Because this is an incredible opportunity for the city, not just to make it a convention center happen, but also to knit the neighborhood, especially east of I-37 to downtown, and that opportunity has to be maximized to the largest extent possible. If you do this, then you can begin to take out these streets that you see now in dashed lines and allow for the potential convention center footprint to happen without impacting the traffic flow. and while still allowing the opportunity in the future, not in 2013, but in the future for these improvements and better connections to happen to the east side. The Hemisphere Park Master Plan has proposed a connection between Goliad and Montana, that when that happens, the street project can take that into account along with streetscape improvements. So from a pedestrian, bicycle, and automobile perspective, what does that look like? If you are under the I-37 overpass, it needs to be much more dramatic. You can see it's more friendly to pedestrians and bicyclists. There is a speed ramp existing right now that Kerry and our traffic engineers looked at it and saw that you could take it out as long as you made improvements to the other intersections too. At the same time, the character that you get along Commerce Street can be further extended to the frontage, the new frontage road that connects right down to Cesar Chavez, and that is extended also along the frontage road from Montana to Market. The aim being to move traffic as conveniently as it does right now, but still allow for pedestrians and bicyclists and service access to the convention center to be better than what it is existing. So the third, and this is the second last section, are the neighborhood streets. There were a number of neighborhood streets we had, which essentially lead to Hemisphere Park. And what we heard from you that you wanted to see, for example, were better places for outdoor dining, places to walk, shade, comfort. If you look at Alamo Street from Cesar Chavez to Presa, it's not so bad. There are lots of great restaurants, there are lots of places to walk and bike along, and that's what we did. We kept a lot of the streets as they are right now. The same with Cesar Chavez. The need was to connect to the river, and you could walk and bike along Cesar Chavez, especially west of Alamo Street too. And this is what the plan would then look like. One of the streets that you said you wanted to see improvements was also Nueva, where there was a desire for additional parking to be seen. In this plan, which is really showing you existing, you begin to see how you can have more diagonal parking and increase the number of parking spaces along Nueva streets. So the last street is actually Park Streets. Streets such as Goliad, which you said you wanted it to have a very park-like character. It's right now not a bad street to walk right in the middle of the street. It's a complete street by itself, except it does not have cars. So the opportunity is to make sure that you allow potential opportunity for cars to use the street, and then also for a future transit line, a streetcar line. If that comes, it can happen too also. But there are other streets like Water Streets, and as new development happens, like 80 feet wide, then the opportunities increase even more. You begin to have opportunities where you don't have increased opportunities for a park, lots of trees and landscaping, but also allow for opportunities like farmers market to happen, for children to play in the middle in a very safe area, and also to able to grow food. We don't want these streets to look like other streets, city streets. They should have their unique character and identity. And other cities have done it too. They have made sure that they make certain streets very unique, so that you can comfortably walk along these streets. You can have various activation along these streets. You can dance on the streets if that's what you like to do. And at the end of the day, you can enjoy with your family this street, because this is San Antonio. Family is important to us, and at the end of the day, we want our streets to reflect our community values. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and your attention. I know that was a lot of information. We will be here until 8 o'clock or until the crowd leaves. We'll be answering questions. And again, I encourage you to fill out your comment cards. Now is the time to do it, and let your neighbors know and let the people you work with know that now is the time to give feedback so that we can consider it as we finalize some of these. Please fill out the 2 comment cards. Please get your questions answered at the stations. And thank you very, very much for your time. It is very valuable for us to have you here. Thank you.